Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm extraordinarily excited to welcome Corryn Freeman here to our show. She's a Florida-based social activist, political operative, and a social change agent. She currently serves as the executive director of Future Coalition, an organization whose mission is to provide young changemakers with the resources they need to propel transformational change. And, we talk a lot about the need for change and the lack of resources to get there. That's why I'm excited to have Corryn here to talk about that. Corryn, thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I love bringing folks on the show who are doing the work on the ground. A lot of folks will be armchair activists. They'll tweet about something, and they'll complain. But I particularly admire leaders who lead organizations who are putting resources in the hands of young people. Talk a bit more about your organization. Who are you? How did you get started? What are some of the projects you're working on right now?
Absolutely. So a bit about like how I got started and into the work of Future Coalition first. So when I grew up with very socially conscious parents. My dad was president of the local NAACP chapter in Maryland, where I grew up. I grew up literally sitting on his lap at NAACP meetings. I grew up, I think it was like the second Million Man March. He was in the planning meetings and I was just sitting there watching the planning happen. And then I was there at the march. I remember meeting Dorothy Height. I remember meeting so many like prominent activists, social justice figures, just because of the work that my dad did. He also ran a church. And we were at the church all the time doing community work, soup kitchen work, things like of that nature. And I grew up with a mom who ran a philanthropic nonprofit, a community foundation that got money from larger donors and gave it really directly into the hands of people who were doing the direct services work. So like that is very much anchored in who it is that I am as a young girl, because my parents were very involved in community and socially active and socially conscious. So when I went to school, I went to Howard University. The year is 2007. There's this big contested election. It's like the first presidential election. There's this lady, Hillary Clinton, who I'm all for. And then this guy named Barack Obama comes and speaks at Crampton. And I'm like, whoa, that guy is it. That guy is it. He set me on a course to change my major to political science. I worked on the campaign, volunteered on the campaign at that time, graduated with my degree, and then I went to go work on the campaign in 2012 to re-elect Barack Obama.
Amazing. As I hear you talk about your parents, I love these superhero origin stories because it always reminds me of this James Baldwin quote where he says that children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. So,
Amen.
Whatever your parents led by example is you're following their footsteps, and that's a powerful and inspiring thing. So talk about then Future Coalition in particular, because it sounds like what you're describing is like the brainchild of what Future Coalition is. But what's the niche that Future Coalition is filling right now?
Absolutely. So Future Coalition, we fundamentally have a belief that youth have the ability to lead, that youth have vision, youth have strategy, youth have a voice that needs to be listened to. And we advocate for their leadership by investing in them financially, by resourcing them with trainings, knowledge, and intergenerational wisdom. So Future Coalition kind of stands in the gap, one, by amplifying the needs of young people, amplifying the work of young people and resourcing them, and connecting with more established movement leaders, established social justice change agents and leaders, and asking them, in what ways can you incorporate youth? How are you bringing their voices to the table? How are you helping their leadership and not just directing them, using their energy to fuel your desire, but instead listening to them, allowing them to lead. Sometimes that means fail, learn, grow, and help us get across the mantle toward freedom.
Yeah, I love it. And, I think about this often because I don't think people realize when we talk about youth today, this is not a novel concept, right? This is how the United States has moved forward throughout history. We just observed a couple days ago the anniversary of Robert Smalls at 22, commandeering a Confederate vessel, bringing it to Union waters, and then helping turn the tide of the Civil War. We think about Claudette Colvin at 15 years old, years before Rosa Parks, refusing to give up her seat. We think about Dr. King at 26, leading the Montgomery bus boycott. Fred Hampton at 22,
That's right. That's
disrupting.
right.
And so it's always been about the youth. And I'll tell you, one of the things that gets me really upset right now is, and we were talking about this before we started recording, is what's happening in Gaza and Israel and Palestine. And I think about the fact that I was reading yesterday, more than 3,000 students and some professors have been arrested. More than 3,000 in the United States. And meanwhile, the president just authorized another $1 billion in military aid to Israel, even though they admitted 5 days ago, that, yeah, it's pretty clear that Israel is committing war crimes. With the election coming up, the young people I've been talking to are pretty fed up about this, are pretty upset about this. And some are saying we're just not going to vote. What's your response to that? How would you address that, in my view, very valid concern?
Ooh, such a great question, and I appreciate it. And the first thing I want to say about youth is youth are the moral consciousness of the nation. They
Yes.
are not jaded. They see right, they see wrong based on the learnings that they have been taught, and they are like untainted nerve cells that are telling you something is not right. Something is not right. And we are in a place where the vast majority of our political administration is turning a blind eye instead of addressing the needs of those youth. And I completely understand the position that young people are put in, because at the end of the day, whether you like politics, whether you do politics or not, politics is going to do you.
Yes.
As we are witnessing right now with the conflict between Israel and Palestine, and the president sending $1 billion of additional taxpayer dollars over to Israel, or $1 billion worth of ammunition, bombs, whatever, to Israel. What I say to those young people is do not be dismayed and continue to participate in the electoral process. I think the uncommitted campaign is a brilliant way to say that we are present, we are voters, this is where we stand. And it's a very gracious act to the president to let him know that if you do not move, we might not move with you. I think that leveraging your power through your vote in uncommitted at the top of the ticket absolutely makes sense during the primary, to help Joe Biden see that he has a base that wants to support him, but he needs to move in order to get their support. I also think that those young people should focus on their state, local, congressional elections. At Future Coalition, we're really focusing on school board races in red to blue counties, working on getting progressive school board folks elected to give youth what it is that they need to stop, like you said, I'm in Florida, where we have Don't Say Gay, the banning of certain African-American history being taught, books
Don't say
being
climate change.
banned.
It's wild.
Don't say climate, it's crazy. Florida's insane. And to stop kind of some of those things and have people who are advocating at the seat of power to continue to educate young people so that they understand that their dissent is patriotic when they feel the need to stand up. So that's what we're doing at Future Coalition, telling the youth, continue to be engaged, think about creative ways to leverage your vote at the top of the ticket, but definitely pay attention to those middle and bottom ticket races.
That's music to my ears. I think a lot of folks understand or underestimate the impact of those local school board races and how critical they are. I mean, these are the ones. I was reading an article that all these book bans you're seeing is from 11 knuckleheads around the country. 90% of them are from these 11 knuckleheads. It's mind-boggling to me that they can be so influential, but that's what happens when you get organized for evil. And Dr. King reminds us we need to organize for good with even more ferocity. One of the things I really admire, Corryn, about the work that you're doing is you've provided significant grants to young organizers who are allocating resources or providing support to the Maui fires, certainly to Palestine. I was in Maui after the fires last year to provide legal aid, pro bono legal aid. How do you decide? I mean, the world is on fire, literally speaking. How do you decide which initiatives to fund? And can you talk a little bit about the impact you've seen from these grants as well?
Sure. So we have a grant program called the Youth Direct Action Fund. And the way that works is it has a program manager, but we employ a council of young people who review the grant applications. And they are the ones who decide. We decided to predominantly focus on the continental US, what's happening facing young people in the the United States of America.
Sure.
And they review, they choose, and we give grants of up to $5,000 through the Youth Direct Action Fund. But the money that we gave to the Maui wildfires was for young people who were in their community wanting to help provide aid directly. So historically, Future Coalition really had a large climate focus. We've shifted to broaden, take a more intersectional approach, but with that large climate disaster, coupled with the young people who wanted help, we decided to make a larger $75,000 investment in that through the
Amazing.
Community Foundation of Hawaii or Maui. I'm not sure which one it is. Community Foundation of Hawaii, I believe it is. When it comes to the Palestinian organizing, students are standing up across the country. The young people are leading this movement. It is on college campuses. I just saw something about on the 24th in the DMV, high school students are organizing a mass walkout. The youth are telling us right now what matters. And we are supportive at Future Coalition, not directive. And so when they ask, we give.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I mean, and it's and if you're just tuning in, by the way, we're speaking to the brilliant Corryn Freeman. She's the executive director of Future Coalition, an organization who provides young people the resources they need to propel transformational change. And I just love the fact that there's such a direct action here. It's not this, sophistication of, here's how you shall do it. It's, hey, you're smart, you'll figure it out. And if you make a mistake, that's okay, because when you're young, it's the time to make those mistakes. And you're going to grow and develop and be even more effective when you're 30,
Absolutely.
40, 50 years old. And I love that, because when we talk about justice, to me, the root of all justice has to be economic justice. You want to talk about, you want to talk about gender equality, pay women equal.
Say that.
You want to talk about racial justice, let's talk about reparations. You want to talk about indigenous justice,
that.
Reparations there
Land
as well.
back.
Thank you. And so to be an organization saying, hey, young people, we want to help you achieve justice. Here's money, go forth and conquer, is powerful. And the work you've done really transcends in this space as well. I was reading up, and I loved, because for me, universal healthcare is a human right. It's a fundamental core of what we should be offering. And your work with the Florida for All organization included managing the Medicaid expansion ballot initiative and coordinating voter registration efforts. This is the Lord's work you're doing right here. Talk about that, because there's a lot of states still trying to figure that out. What did you do, and how can you talk about your success and progress there?
Absolutely. So I want to give a big shout out to Florida for All and the statewide alignment group. Y'all know who you are if you are listening. They taught me so much about what it means to organize in a collaborative. So not just a coalition, but a deep alignment structure where organizations that have different focuses align themselves on a vision, much like the right does, to achieve gains over a period of time. This alignment structure still works, still exists, and we are working toward achieving that change over a longer period of time. And the work that I did at Florida for All, for me, was extremely meaningful. So one thing I did was the ballot initiative for Medicaid expansion, worked with great organizers from a multitude of organizations to organize petition collecting, paid and volunteer, across the state of Florida to get Medicaid expansion on the ballot. Unfortunately, we weren't successful that time, but it makes space for another Medicaid expansion ballot initiative to happen in the future. I also worked on Amendment 4 in Florida, which I was the field director there, where the Second Chances campaign, where we were successful in giving 2.4 million returning citizens, former felons, giving them access to their voting rights eligibility once again in the state of Florida. And that was an extremely landmark opportunity. But that coalition was led by Desmond Meade, who was able to pull together organizers from all across the state, resources from out of the state of Florida, to get more than 60% of Floridians to pass that ballot initiative. And then also building out the election protection program, which is really the highlight of one of my organizing experiences. I had the opportunity to brainstorm what an election protection program would look like across the state of Florida, work with dozens of organizations and individual volunteers to create a mechanism and a machine that honestly ended up working without me, that really protected voters. There was a whole system where we had the volunteers out at the polls. They would communicate via WhatsApp. Whenever things had to be escalated, we escalated it to the legal chat. Things got really bad. They went to the executive directors and in the boiler room to either choose to dispatch, whether it was police or have legal aids then come, things of that nature to protect the vote. But it really taught me about the importance of being in a collective and working together, not having any ego. My role might be to build the thing, but I'm here to work with you to make the thing a reality. And the thing, though it might have been born of my mind, does not belong to me. It belongs to all of us because it's for the good of the community.
Beautifully said. It's that old saying that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this is indicative of that. And back to this point you made about voter registration and voter access, particularly for returning citizens. I like to remind folks that the entire concept of felon disenfranchisement is rooted not only in white supremacy, but overtly on the recognition that these enslaved people might be free, and we need to find new mechanisms to ensure that they don't have access to power or influence. And I think I was in law school when I read The New Jim Crow, and how Dr. Michelle Alexander talks about there's a myth that if we only educated people enough, we could end racism. And maybe on the individual level, that's true, but systemically racist policies are extraordinarily sophisticated. They don't exist to a lack of ignorance. They exist to an excess of maliciousness and just pure evil planning, and something like felon disenfranchisement.
Intentionally crafted. They are intentionally crafted and built, and they must be systemically dismantled.
Exactly.
And it's giving people the political education to be able to see the invisible structures that we flow through. These systems flow through us. And it is oftentimes just not in our conscious because we have been so brainwashed essentially to believe certain things are right and just, when the reality is no, that's patriarchy, that's capitalism. That's racism.
That's right. It's I remember the North Carolina appeals court when they overturned the voter ID law in North Carolina. They wrote that the Republicans wrote this law with surgical precision to target those IDs that Black voters are more likely to use. And so so you look at it like, well, it's a voter ID. Everybody has voter IDs, right? So what's wrong with that? But then when you look at the precision, to your point, on the surface, it's like, well, what's wrong with that? It's normal. But when you look down under the hood a little bit, you're like, oh, they actually did research to find out, do Black people particularly prefer a particular type of ID? And if they do, you banned that particular ID, forcing Black people to have to go through an extra step. And the thing is, you don't need to ban 100% of Black people. You just need to ban enough percent. 1%, 2%, enough to get over that.
To keep your seat of power.
That's exactly. Yep. And that's what we're dealing with. So the work you're doing in the space is critical. And again, if you're tuning in, we are speaking to someone who I just met, but I'm in love with because she's amazing. Corryn Freeman, Florida-based activist and executive director of the Future Coalition. Let's talk music, because I know this is a big thing for you. You've co-founded the Black Violin Foundation, empowering youth through music. I've got 3 kids. They do a million different things, and one of them begged me to get him a keyboard, and so I did. And like, kids are amazing. He found an app on the Apple Store, and he's teaching himself how to play piano on an app. And I'm just like, what? That's incredible. But I love seeing him grow. What role do you see music play in the social justice movement?
Ooh, thank you for the question. I love music. Music is an expression of like music expresses what words often cannot. You know, there's so
Yes.
much beauty in music that I feel so deeply. And music is the way that movements emote,
Mm,
right? Movements portray the emotional feelings that movements are going through. Art does
mm,
that. And I think music is here to reflect the time that we are in, to reflect back to the establishment power structure, to reflect back to people who won't hear, and to validate for the people who are feeling where we are in the world, in society, what's happening, to validate that pain, to validate that
mm.
hurt, to validate that excitement, to validate that joy, and to show those who won't listen that this exists, because music has the capacity to touch people in places where our words, our cries, our protests can't.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I One of my mentors growing up is the late jazz musician, jazz great Yusuf Lateef, and
Okay.
um, I, I was young when I first met him. It was at the mosque, and I think I was maybe 13 years old. I had no idea who he was, and just kind of like this loving grandfather figure. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, okay. And then Ahmed Jamal is another one. I think where where I really appreciate the role of music in the social justice movement is especially in Jim Crow America, the jazz movement
Mm,
in particular, because and this is coming straight from Yusuf Uncles, what we call them, is that this was their form of protest, that when they would be beaten in the streets for speaking out, this was their way of telling their story in a way that their community understood. And for him, his community was twofold. It was African Americans and Muslim Americans. And at that point in time, it was basically a complete overlap of the two circles in and of itself. Let's talk about the future because we're coming up on this election very, very quickly, less than 6 months away. Every single poll in swing states, vast majority of them, shows Biden losing to Trump by anywhere from 1 to 6, 7 points. These are swing states that he needs to win. I don't see how mathematically you can win an election without these. Um, but he's not changing course on things that young people care about. He's taken steps forward on climate justice, but he's not being as aggressive as what the scientists tell us that we need to do. He's taking steps forward on student loan forgiveness, but it's a far cry from what was initially promised of total loan forgiveness. On Gaza, he continues to acknowledge that while Israel's committing war crimes, continue to send them arms. Um, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, why wouldn't you change course? Do you think why do you think that is? This is a big question, and I don't even know if it's fair to ask, but when you're running a campaign, you see ideas that are unpopular and you say, let me change my ideas. Why aren't we seeing that happen? What's going on? What are we missing?
I can tell you what I think it is, but again, I don't have the answer. But just
Yeah.
from my point of view, I think there are certain issues that when Biden got elected, I don't think he anticipated
Mm,
October 7th, 2023 happening. I didn't think that he anticipated having to make good on commitments to APAC, having to make
mm,
good on allegiances around this Israeli-Palestinian conflict that we are seeing right now, at all at the scope at which things are happening. I don't think that he anticipated that things would kind of pop off the way that they have popped off.
sure.
And I can only imagine the amount of pressure after having stated all of these things, made all of these alignments, and then the cards fall as they do. Um, I think that he is having trouble finding balance between what is right, what is just, and his commitments and alignments. He is
Mm,
out of what appears to me to be alignment with his words and actions. He can't make his actions meet his words. And I think sometimes that also has something to do with the structures that exist around the presidency that sometimes people don't quite understand, even though he was the vice president of the nation.
yeah. Well said. I mean, but I think that's where people would say you ran on being the most seasoned veteran out there who can solve all these problems. So how did this stuff catch you off guard?
That's
Um,
the right question to ask. And I hope everyone asks themselves that question.
but I want you to double down on a point as we're down to the last 3 or 4 minutes about the importance of down ballot voting. Why does that matter in the grand scheme of things? If the president ends up being somebody that you just vehemently oppose and disagree with, what role does down ballot voting really play in this place?
Absolutely. Because, like I said earlier, if you don't do politics, politics will do you regardless. And the politicians that are further down on the ballot are the politicians that most directly impact your day-to-day life in the city, in the county, and in the state that you are operating in. So, having a good read on who your city council people are. Like, what are the plans for community development? Do you like having open space parks? Are you okay with having developers come in and take that public park space and now make it this big mini mall, gentrified community that now impacts your ability to pay your rent? Now your rent is $500 higher because of the decisions that your city council, your county executive approved. Those things hit you very, very, very directly. And they impact your economic stability, what you're able to learn in schools, the school boards, what the things that you are allowed to do as a citizen or resident in the community that you are operating in.
So what you're saying is every young person should be running for office.
Absolutely. Everyone. I just had a conversation with Congressman Maxwell Frost yesterday,
Yeah.
and he said something to me that really was beautiful. And fun fact, I was approached to actually be Maxwell's campaign manager, but I chose to sit on his kitchen cabinet and I watched him kind of
Yeah.
become where he is now, which is
Yeah.
beautiful. He said to me, it is important though, he was a very prominent gun reform activist before he decided to run for office.
Yep.
But he talks about his success in getting the president to take on the Office of Gun Violence Prevention as an executive order, influenced by Maxwell Frost. He credits his connection to the organizing and activism of gun violence, of gun reform, and bringing that with him into office that allowed for President Biden to see that. So what's important for young people to know is to be connected in movement. And when you run with movement on your side, because Maxwell said it. He said he brought movement with him into his elected position. And when he did that, we were able to see a piece of reform. So guys, get active in community movements, whether it's Future Coalition, Dream Defenders, whatever organization that you feel aligned with, and don't be scared, make the run.
You took the last question before I could even ask it. What should young people be doing? Corryn Freeman, Executive Director of Future Coalition. The last comment, Corryn, how can folks support the work you're doing? How can they find you and support your organization and elevate the incredible work that you're already doing?
Absolutely. So follow us on socials. Instagram, we're at Future Coalition. Follow us there. Go to futurecoalition.org. Feel free to look through all of the programs. They have different opening deadlines. If you feel like you have a project that you want incubated with Future Incubator, apply there. If you want YDAF, Youth Direct Action Funds, up to $5,000 to organize your own direct action, apply. If you are a civic volunteer or want to be civically engaged, look up our civic program. And if you just generally like want to help, join our email list. We offer a lot of petition signing, phone banking, and text banking through our email program that you can be a part of.
You guys, I hope you're paying attention because leaders like Corryn are rare, and she's not only talking the talk, she's walked the walk, and she's offering you resources if you apply yourself. Corryn, thank you so much for being with us. Hope to have you back soon.
Most definitely. Thank you.
Corryn Freeman, Florida-based social activist and political operative, executive director of Future Coalition, an organization who is focused on helping young people be the change makers they were born to be. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse.